And then he said, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. Don't wish for less problems, wish for more skills.
I can't catch a break, guys.
Yeah.
Get them the fuck away from me. I can't be around those guys.
People think, oh, well, cleaning your room, that's just a cliche. It's like, yeah, really, eh? Just go ahead and try it.
If people had any idea how powerful sleep is for healing from anything, and the fact that it's free.
My mind is absolutely bulletproof, solid as a rock.
Podcast. So guys, welcome to another episode of the Fighting Fit Show. Today it's just myself and Brandinho. The topic of discussion for today is going to be the psychology of transformation. This episode is inspired by a number of different things, mainly that I am embarking on my own personal transformation over the next 90 days. We'll be kind of filling you guys in with more information. Myself and Peter are actually working on a special project. We're going to try and make a little kind of mini say transformation documentary. So I've been kind of looking into these things over the last little while. A lot of it is inspired by one of my favorite YouTube channels called the Academy of Ideas, and particularly the kind of concepts promoted by the likes of Carl Jung, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Abraham Maslow. I have actually just put a very interesting quote into the Facebook page there. Anybody in our Healthy Lifestyle Club, if you're not in it, you should be. So maybe go check that out. Let me just get it up here because I don't want to misquote it. 1 second. So the quote is, if you plan on being anything less than you are capable of being, you will probably be unhappy all the days of your life. Abraham Maslow. I just kind of thought, geez, that's pretty powerful. That people who are not, embarking on this journey of personal transformation, this journey of self-actualization, that I feel like is one of the greatest sources of dissatisfaction or unhappiness. So with all that said, that brief intro, Brandon, what are your thoughts on today's podcast?
I'll be honest with you, Steve, I haven't a clip. No, I'm joking. Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, this is kind of what we do in terms of the coaching aspect of things. We take people through the model of change the entire time, and one of the cool things that you get to do as a coach is kind of, poke and prod a little bit. Some people don't really need that much coaching, to be fair. They just, either they don't think that deeply about it, and so going that deep just to them just doesn't really hit home. And then there's others who are only a couple tools away. But then there's the other people who really have some deep work to do. And to be honest, like, they're the hardest people to work with, but they're my favorite people to work with because this is the kind of stuff that I'm really interested in. Like, I really like going, layers and layers and layers deep, because this is the kind of work that I needed to do when I started. And one of the biggest things that you said there about kind of self-actualization, very, very important. To kind of, it's like, well, who do you want to be? Like, what, like, in your heart of hearts, like, who do you really feel like? And I suppose that question itself can be a little bit tricky, because some people can have a very negative identity and they maybe don't have a positive vision for themselves, but helping and starting to shape us, helping and just the individual starting to shape that vision for themselves. It's something that I'm sure everybody struggles with, and it's something that we should all be trying to do, because it's hard to kind of pull something out from the void, and something that's not real, it's not tangible, it's it's potential. And so it's like, what is potential, and who could you potentially be, and who you could potentially be could be lots of different things. And it's important that you aim for the best thing, because why not? Why would you not aim for the best thing? And often enough, reason that people don't reach for the best thing is because it also highlights the parameters for failure, which is a big issue that many people have. They don't have the confidence to kind of strive forward and take on the challenge because they're afraid that they're going to fail, and so it's easier to kind of set the bar down low. But as you said, then the issue with that is that if you hit that bar, which you probably will if you set it low enough, or even just a reasonable bar, you'll hit the bar. Well, you're not happy because you set a low bar. And so it's like, okay, well, you've hit your measured success, but it's a very low level of success, objectively or maybe even subjectively. So it's like, it's not real true success, because what you're really capable of is so much greater. But the reason that we don't want to hit it is because obviously there's an awful lot of work to do behind it. Maybe you're not competent yet. Maybe you haven't got the skills. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe if you listen to any successful person ever, they've failed a million trillion times. And some people, if they've never engaged in anything hard or tried to succeed in anything, just that first failure can just be overwhelming, and maybe we're like, oh fuck, I failed, I'm terrible, and the negative chat ensues. And so, that to me is kind of what we're going to kind of dig into today.
Yeah. The psychology of transformation is the topic of the podcast, and such a deep topic. Again, we have spent, I would assume, more hours than the average person, at least, kind of looking through this kind of information. More so, kind of for myself, was to for my own personal transformation. It's something that I feel like the work will never be done. And even kind of speaking with Chris recently as well, and he kind of mentioned it before. He kind of done a very popular video that resonated with a lot of members in the the Devil podcast. This kind of concept of drifting, that we're kind of, you have to constantly be rowing the boat in the right direction, or the tide will take you out. And there's I think I might have touched on this in a previous podcast, but it was the Netflix documentary about trauma with Jonah Hill. And one of the things that his therapist said that kind of really resonated with me, and I've kind of thought about it a lot since, was, the things that we're guaranteed in life is pain, uncertainty, and constant work. Pain, uncertainty, and constant work. They are the things that you're guaranteed in life. There's another one, was like death and taxes or something like that. But pain, uncertainty, and constant work. It's just like this. The work is never done. The work will just never be done, because it said, if you let it go, the weeds will take the garden. If you stop, once you take a couple of weeks off, and things are just kind of starting to disintegrate. Like the weeds will take the house. There was actually on the retreat, there was like a little kind of, I think they call them like little fincas, like a little ruin just outside in a little field next to kind of where the penthouse was. And this is kind of the concept that we were talking about, like weeds, and you constantly having to kind of mind your garden and plant the seeds if you want flowers to grow or fruit to grow, etc. Kind of just looking out the window was such a great metaphor for it. Whereas like the weeds would literally take the house. Like this was at one point was a beautiful house on the hill with views of the ocean. Could see the entire landscape around you, but just through that, what would you say is passivity, lack of action. It just deteriorates. So that's kind of thing, like this kind of thing about constant work, on this kind of journey to like self-actualization, personal transformation. And you said like setting up this ideal, like who do you want to be? Like one of the other videos I listened to recently from the Academy of Ideas on YouTube, was this concept of creating a second identity. Like this whole thing, like you create an ideal. It's like, who could I be, or who would I want to be? Who would I want to be like? So you pick maybe like 5 people that inspire you, and you kind of take a few character traits, and you kind of create this other person. Then you essentially try to act it out, let's say. And like in especially with religion, like we're given these ideals. Like Jesus is obviously the best example. Like I think it's a common term in like say Christian communities. Like what would Jesus do? So this is like creating an ideal. Like if Jesus was in that situation, how would he act? What would his kind of character traits be, or what decisions would he make? And that kind of brings you on to another quote here by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And this is, sow a thought and you reap an action, sow an act and you reap a habit, sow a habit and you reap a character, sow a character and you reap a destiny. And this kind of whole thing, like when it comes down to it, I feel like it's all about identity, and kind of who we believe we truly are at our core, that we always fall back into that to that pattern of identity. We've kind of talked about this a little bit in the past. Of like, if you feel like you're the fat kid in school, you'll always be the fat kid from school. If you feel like, whatever it is, if you feel like you're the failure, the person that can't handle any responsibility, the person that's always late, once you kind of start to identify with these traits or these behaviors or these actions, like you will always fall back into them. When you fall back into this, say, unconscious state, when say life gets busy or stressful, etc., and you're not maybe being your best self, let's say. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Obviously, identity is massive, as you said, so very, very important that we kind of watch who we think that we are. And I would really advise anybody to be very careful of any identities that you yourself would kind of view as negative. It's like, if you think that they're negative, just don't identify with them. Identify with something else. Pick another person to be. And many people can struggle with kind of reshaping themselves and getting a new identity. It is very, very difficult. But one of the things that you kind of made me think about there was this law of attrition. Or even as you said, law of passivity. It's this thing is constantly coming at you. And a funny image just came into my head, because an awful lot of people, you know, as I said, it's like the reason that your life is getting worse. Let's give you your due, and let's say it's generally not your fault. Let's put it down to the forces of nature. Like, for talk's sake, you know, why are you getting injured? Well, it's not because you're inadvertently going out, or, you know, purposefully going out and injuring yourself. It's because time, especially in this culture with sitting, like sitting takes a massive toll on you over time. Like it just wears on you, just like that the weeds taking over the house. You know, it's like it really is. It's taken over. You know, it's like this thing is a force. You know, it's like you have a fucking wall, and there's a tide that's crashing in on every single day. And some people, in terms of the works that they do, like they're going out with a wee bucket and they're like fucking taking their bucket, and they're like, I'm out with that bucket every single day. And it's like, listen to me, you don't understand the work that is going to need to be done in order to move this thing in the right direction. Like, it's not you in your bucket every once in a while haphazardly hoping that you get it right, or like the you know, you're going out with a wee pair of scissors trying to reclaim that house, you know, from the weeds. It's like, that's not what it looks like. And in this culture, we are a bucket and scissor culture. Like, it's like most people just, all they have to do, like the government will come down next month and they'll do the garden for me, and as long as I'm just out here with me scissors, or you know, whatever it is, like, oh, my mum has a bad gardens run in our family, and so oh, we don't have a green finger, you know. It's like we just kind of fall into these stories, and every once in a while you get somebody and they pick up a book, Gardening for Dummies, you know, and they take that book to its nth degree, and along the way they learn X, Y, or Z, and not only that, they buy another book, you know, Gardening for Intermediates, and then it says, and eventually they've reclaimed the house and added an extension, all this kind of stuff, and then they look at people, or people look at them and go, oh, geez, I wish I was as fortunate as you, or whatever it is. It's like, do you think during that process, that made up story, like I just said, that person didn't, you know, cut his finger umpteen times, you know, build the wall in the wrong place umpteen times, you know, like have the wrong tools for the job? It's like, that's just part of the process. But it's like, you have to learn to kind of start engaging it. And something David Goggins, one of these podcasts, I won't mention David Goggins, but I'll bring him up again. It's like when we think about the level of work that we're doing, it's like, I'm working super hard as I can. It's like, compared to what? It's like, what, like, and like, what is your reference point for hard work? It's like, is it when you were in secondary school and you were studying for your leaving cert and like you kind of barely bluffed it? That was in your head, you know, the hardest you've ever worked. It's like, what is the hardest you can work? Like, how hard are you? Like, because I know myself, like, I'm cursed with knowing how hard I can work. So I know that I'm just constantly falling short of it. It's like, I know, because I pay attention to all these amazing, miraculous fucking people, and I know right well that we're the same, and so I know right well that, you know, the gap is like infinite. It's like, you could literally get, like, there's people out there who are literally trying to build a business, getting 4 hours sleep and working 18-hour days. There's like, that's just what they're doing, and it's just like, that's the goal. So when someone comes to me and they're like, I don't have time, it's like, you have like, I understand right now with your kind of belief system, you feel like you don't have time. It's like,
with your current priorities, you don't have time, but you need to put first things first, and it's really important to you.
With your current paradigm, you know, it's like what you think, like, because even that list of priorities, like, we could probably fit 5 more priorities in there realistically if we were to fucking sit down and really have a look at things. It's like, if we were, and not only that, if we were to really stress you out with it, if we were like to really challenge you and fucking ask every ounce of your character, and then more, and that's how we build more character. It's like, who knows what we could achieve? You know what I mean? But, and again, and fair enough, to people's credit, you know, who wants to fucking do that? You know, it's like, it is.
Exactly. But it boils down to this kind of concept of the why, and this is kind of something that does come up a lot. I think it's was Leach or Young, I can't remember which one, but he says, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. You know, so these things, I think that was also brought up in Man Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, you know, kind of having a why, about kind of what, like, and Jim Rohn talks about this concept as well, in terms of like, when you have a strong why, it pulls you through difficult times, difficult circumstances, whereas a lot of the time we're relying on this kind of push style motivation, you know, trying to force our way through the walls, force our way over the barriers, whereas when you have this kind of strong vision for the future, it pulls you towards it. It's magnetic. But a lot of people don't have a vision for a better future. And again, sometimes we do, and then we kind of forget. We don't remind ourselves about it enough. So this is kind of goes back to that quote about, like kind of say like more about our rituals and our routines and doing these things. That's kind of like, get in the journal and fall out of journal and get into it, fall out of it. But the days that I'm doing my journal and I have my little, my just remind myself what my goals are. I'm like, oh fuck yeah, let's get to work. I'm excited. I think it was Jim Rohn also says, what is that quote? People are, oh, why am I up early? And they're like, well, if you're ahead of where I'm heading, you'd be up early too. It's like, like of course you would. Like if you have this kind of strong vision, or you have a strong mission, something that you're trying to achieve. So this kind of whole thing of like self-actualization, like it is quite personal to the person, because some people, like David Goggins, it can be all let's say more masculine energy in terms of like what are we doing, what are we achieving, but also to some people, like it can be maybe more feminine energy about more kind of love and compassion orientated, or being a good mother, or even like things like, well, that's obviously a lot of hard work too, but things like like they said in the video was talking about, like, they used to describe people as being an earthly person, somebody who was kind of grounded to the earth, and like we don't really talk like that anymore. It's more about now, it's like flying high and fast. And these are kind of the words that we use, rather than things like being earthly and grounded and this kind of stuff, because that can also be self-actualized, to be a monk, let's say. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be what let's say the Western world kind of wants you to have. But I just feel like people have to learn to listen to themselves. You have to kind of learn to kind of start listening to that inner voice. Because one of the kind of key things that I've kind of identified myself during, like, say, my when I'm trying to say self-reflect and journal and stuff, is like, right, why haven't I yet achieved all the things that I want to achieve, or kind of where are the character flaws, where's the room for improvement? I kind of feel one of the things for me is just impulsivity, just very, very, very impulsive. And obviously that can be really good, because one of the, let's say, the character traits of, let's say, successful people would be the speed of which, like, they have an idea and they take action. I'm kind of impulsive. I've got a good idea. I'm like, fucking, we're changing all today. Tear this thing down. Let's build this new thing. Fucking throw that thing away. Like, let's not waste any more time. Let's get moving. Whereas that is good in some contexts, but then it's also has negative connotations, especially things around maybe like impulsive around food and different things, or like even like dopamine, the phones and whatever. Because there's obviously, like, there's good and bad to everything. There's pros and cons to everything. But that's kind of something that I've identified. So that's kind of something that I'm trying to work on specifically over the next couple of months as part of my own kind of, let's say, personal transformation. Because I just identified it as, like, it's one of these key things that if you don't get to the bottom of it, it's just constantly going to show up in different ways and impact your let's say, your personal growth. So I'm using this concept called surfing the urge. So this is a very simple, it's just essentially a mindfulness practice. It's like when you kind of feel like you kind of have these strong impulses, you surf the urge. You sit with it and just say, okay, why am I feeling like this? What's actually happening here? Whereas the tendency would be, feel the emotion, boom, go take action. Like eating food, again, is the easiest example, or maybe the one that people listening to this podcast might resonate with the most. Like, like you get an urge to eat that Kit Kat in the press, and you just grab it, rip it over, and it's gone. And literally, like, the whole experience lasts maybe 60 seconds. Whereas if you just said, okay, it's not to say I can't have it, because there's the old saying also is that which you resist will persist. It's like the harder you resist something, that's kind of cutting things out is also not a good idea. So just say, okay, I can have it, but I'm going to give it 5 minutes, and you just create that little bit of space, and you surf the urge. You're kind of just trying to understand, okay, why am I feeling like this? And then, like most things, like, again, they say it comes in waves. It tends to dissipate. Right then, that was kind of quite interesting. So what do you think about that, kind of this whole concept of, like, self-awareness, understanding yourself, a little bit of self-reflection, listening to that voice in your head? Because I feel like that's the problem. Like that thing you said, like, it's because you probably could be doing way better, because you're with yourself all the time. That there was probably 100 opportunities, and I know there's 100 opportunities where I could have taken an action, could have done something that would have moved me in the right direction. I didn't do it. You can't lie to yourself. This whole thing, like self-confidence, like, you can't fake self-confidence. Like, you can, when people say, like, you fake it till you make it, is you show up and you take the actions, and then over time, now you've built proof, and then you become confident, because you have a list of, okay, here's the 10 things I've done. And now I can identify as self-confident, because I've actually done the things. And obviously, you have to feel the fear and do it anyway in the beginning. But what do you think about that? Do you feel like, because that's something that I'm kind of alluding to, is like, I just feel like a lot of times people aren't necessarily maybe doing the self-reflection. They're not looking at themselves and looking for things that could be improved.
Well, my kind of experience with self-reflection is very, very close to like, the conscience. So my experience, and like just in general, like I'm a very introverted person. For might surprise an awful lot of people who come to my classes. Obviously I'm paid for being loud, and again, obviously, like it's those things aren't, they're not opposing. Like, just because you're very introverted doesn't mean you can't be extroverted. But like, my reflection process is completely internal and very quick. Like, I just get like my conscience tells me exactly, you're doing this, and it's more like a feeling. So I just get these feelings, and something that I've really struggled with, or I'm a lot better at it now, but something I like, it just popping up when we kind of were doing a little bit of research for this, and now that you're talking, like, one of the biggest things that I really struggled with was integration. So I was a very, very passive person and very agreeable, and so as part of this job, something that I would notice is that there would be so many opportunities to be. I'd have to be a little bit disagreeable in order to kind of get what I would feel like would be the benefit for that person, but I couldn't do it because I was too agreeable. And that kind of started to tip its way into kind of like, right, well, I know that I have that side to me, but I just don't necessarily identify with it. So I know that I have aggression in me. I know that I have the ability to do that, but I find it extremely uncomfortable to do it. And one of the best benefits to all my clients that's ever happened is the fact that now, like, I am one of the hard asses now. And I have known so many of my clients that are so thankful and would prefer that coaching style and need that coaching style, because a friend who's just going to agree with them the whole time just isn't that effective when you're looking to change. Because sometimes people need, a slap on the wrist, or just to know that there's somebody on the far side that's going to give them a stern look and go, hey, what the fuck are you doing, kind of thing. Like, you've done that many times to me, and it's been extraordinarily beneficial. So it's like, it's definitely necessary. And so integrating that part of my character into it has been really, really beneficial in my coaching, and then in my personal life, and even again as a coach, and in order to be a more relatable person. Like, I am not a great, or at least in the past, I was not great with nutrition, and I kind of tried to deny that to myself and to my clients as a coach. I kind of, no, like, I can get it right, And as soon as I started to accept that, I'm not necessarily that good at nutrition, well, then I started to try and fix the problem and kind of go, okay, well, you know what it is? I think that people will relate more to the problems than to the perfection. It's like, I'm
100%.
I'm like, the fact that, like, and again, but again, at least as from a coaching perspective, it only is helpful when you're actively working to fix it. It's not useful to have a coach who's poor at nutrition and also doesn't work. That's no fucking use to anybody. But it's like, the fact that I was bad at nutrition, it's like, oh, well, I'm actively engaging. Here's the tips, and that's what people from, or at least my clients, are looking for. It's like, oh, I'm having this problem. Oh, I've had that problem. 6 months back. I've had that problem 12 months back. And so the thing for me, and again, one of the things that we love about the level method is, like, when you start digging into the ugly parts of yourself, the things you aren't good at, that's where the big corners of growth are. And so it's like, whatever you're afraid of, and whatever the thing that you're like afraid of challenging or afraid of growing towards, me with the cold showers, like, I get, like, me with running, me with injuries, me with flexibility. It's like, these are all things that I, like, massively identify with now, and have given me so much self-confidence, because, again, as you said, it's like, it comes after the action. And one of the things that I love now to do is, like, see when I started something and I just feel complete, like, I remember with the rings as well, before I got my muscle up, I remember starting something just feeling like, this is impossible. Like, I'm like I'm a seed. Like, this is like I couldn't be further away from the final product. That's when I know, I was like, oh, big growth's coming. I was like, big growth's coming. As soon as I step outside my depth and I kind of know that I don't have a leg to stand on, it's very humbling. You're in very shaky territory. You feel like an absolute beginner. It's like, to me, that's like, and it doesn't necessarily even matter where that is now. It's like, if I find something that's where that lives, I kind of find that that's a path that I want to try and stay on, because in my experience, like, initially it's a little bit uncomfortable, but like a month in, like, you're telling people all about it. It's like, it's very exciting, like, the growth that you've kind of, oh, this is what I've learned, this is what I've seen. And in my experience, because most people don't do an awful lot of stuff, most people just kind of stick to what to know, is like, it only takes a matter of, 4 to 6 months before you're an expert in comparison to most people, which is really cool, because then they're like, oh, what about this? And they're like, oh, what's this? Like, oh, here's like 5 or 6 very small tips that I've learned. And again, once you kind of get into that, it's like, well, now we're starting to form an identity because now you're somebody that is the go-to person on that thing, and that just kind of reinforces it, and you get all these kind of stacking features. And I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And I like the thing you said about the, like, because that's the experience I had today. And I'll kind of start this little tangent with a quote, and it's, we cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. So we cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. So this whole concept, like, there's like, even like the, say, like the 12 steps or whatever, is the 12 steps, like the AA program or whatever, like, you have to admit that you have a problem before you can even attempt to fix it, and it's not about berating yourself or condemning yourself. You have to kind of accept it. And then, as we kind of I've talked about recently as well, is like this whole thing is like, what was that doing for you? Understanding that, as a human with needs, these things, these bad habits and these things that we fall into, they're fulfilling a need. They're fulfilling, and again, usually I find it's love and connection is usually the one that's missing for most of us. And we kind of trying to fill these voids with other kind of habits, routines, behaviors.
What about just pure pleasure? Like, for talk's sake, like alcohol. It's like some people just like to drink by themselves. Like, and at food, again, it's like, I feel like there's some. I feel that, again, back to kind of, now we're back to gamer mate. I feel like there's some kind of self-soothing as well on top of that, like an awful lot of bad habits, like, at least in my experience, like, like, it's nearly just unconscious soothing. It's like, it's just, I just need to feel better about myself. I just need to feel better. I need to recover.
Yeah, but I think that would kind of, and again, it obviously depends. Like the con, again, the thing is, like, this is like the voice inside your head is pretty accurate. Like, like, if you're doing too much, like I said, there's nothing wrong with going and having a couple of beers every once in a blue moon, to kind of have the crack with your friends or whatever, or social event. If you're drinking too much, if you're kind of, you're kind of pushing it too far. So that's the thing, like, and we, my thing is, like, we tell ourselves that voice is the enemy, when really it's your best friend. It's your own little Jiminy Cricket. It's your own little conscience that's there to kind of help you and guide you towards on this path of self-actualization. That's there to say, like, no, like, if you're like, a lot of people are circumstantially depressed, and it's like, well, this whole thing, I can't remember the quote, but I kind of seen it recently. It was like, or I think it was a Jeff Bezos video I shared on my Instagram story, and it was like, like we're stressed out when we could do something but we don't. That's kind of what really stresses us out. It's not like things outside of our control. Like, we very quickly accept that it's outside of our control and we can't do anything about it. So we don't necessarily worry. But the things that we could have changed, that we could have done, that, like, here I am again. I'm stressed out. I'm going out with my friends, but none of my clothes fit right, and I'm feeling like shit. It's like, I feel terrible because I know I could have went to the gym 100 times over the last 6 months and probably not had to, let's say, go through this. And these are the things that I find tend to depress us. But just to kind of bring it back to that point about we cannot change anything until we accept it. I kind of feel like, because obviously this is about the psychology of transformation, that is the first step. And I kind of had that experience today as I kind of start my transformation, just to accept, I've let myself go, instead of trying to hide it, and wear the baggy jumpers and just, no, I'm still good. It's like, no, actually, that I let it slide a little bit too far. And it was almost like let's say a weight was lifted. And even you said, like, with the nutrition thing, like, once you kind of admit that, I'm actually not that good at nutrition. I actually have a little bit of work to do here. It's like the weight is lifted. Now you kind of start, you've got a little bit more humility, and you stop condemning yourself. Or, like, it's not about saying.
I would really, really like to hammer home on that point. Like, I feel like the biggest change that was ever made by me was like this self-judgment. Like, I done away with self-judgment. Like, it's like, now, what would we say? Critique, not criticism. It's like, I critique myself, no doubt. It's like, we have to critique ourselves. We have to evaluate our performance, but it's not criticism. I never criticize. Like, I am never hard on myself ever, not once. But what I do is I'll go back and I'll go, okay, what happened? And I'll do that constantly. And again, I've known, and maybe this is different for everybody else, but I've known myself to be quite a fair judge, and quite a fair, like, if I have to now do some recourse, like, I will also do the recourse. So it's kind of like, right, well, you slept in today. It's like, well, why did you sleep in today? I was like, well, I genuinely was tired, or were you just been lazy? It's like, okay, we have to weigh that up. Now we're not going to judge ourselves for the answer, but we've got either work to do. Either you're in the habit of snoozing now, and we're going to need to put in a backstop to make sure that doesn't happen again. Maybe it's 3 or 4 alarms. For talk's sake, I know for a wee while when Zach was just born, I was sleeping in the spare room. All right, I might have been sleeping with Mason at the time. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember what I did was I set the alarm up somewhere that Chloe would hear it, and that would cause absolute mayhem if I had an alarm set the house unnecessarily. So I knew right well as soon as I heard that alarm, gone, up, and that's it. So whatever needs done in order to get the job done, it's like that's what's going to need done the next time. Now, and again, we're all human, we're all fallible. So it's like you just need to learn yourself. It's like, right, where are your letdowns and what do we need to do? And again, like a big thing for an awful lot of people just with the snooze button is like, I hear so many people complain. It's like, oh, if only I wasn't tired, if only this. Like, this all starts way before all these initial problems. Like, what time do you go to bed? That's it. That's the first and foremost. Like, your bedtime is incorrect. Everything that you're trying to juggle the mess that you set up by not going to bed on time is like, so it's like, if we again, and if you're critiquing, smart and you're really having a look at things as they are, it's like that's where an awful lot of problems can start. Because like if you're tired, everything else can be fucked up, and you can kind of juggle around a couple of different stories as to why it was, but really it was because your bedtime's not right. It's like why did you snooze the alarm? You could probably do extra time in bed. It's like, and for me, for talk's sake, I could work out before work if I went to bed at 8 o'clock, but I've got 2 young kids, so realistically that's not always reasonable. So to me, the next thing is like, right, we'll stop setting an unrealistic standard and let's move the workout. It's like, so we have to be, we have to be cute about it, because again, this is all in an aid towards changing, because these again are actions which are going to create habits, which are then going to create the identity, which is going to create the destiny, or whatever way you put it. And so it's like, right, the actions are a key part of that. And so how do we set up the actions that are going to set you up for success? And we have to be really, really cute about it. Like, you can't be a tyrant slapping yourself like through the fucking ringer just to make sure, well, it's going to get done. I'm just going to force myself to get it done. And this is again where we kind of come back to what I said before about the people working, sleeping 4 hours and working 18. Like, fair enough, if they've got an absolute mad vision and they're super conscientious, that's just the kind of person they are, they're super driven, that's just what they want, fair enough. But I immediately thought about, a slightly better approach to that, which is the Jim Rohn quote, which is one of my favorite quotes, is like, reasonable time is enough time. It's like, and again, reasonable. I love that when we were studying in college and they were talking about case law, they were talking about insurance, like literally, like, you were setting up law here, and we're talking about liability, and we're talking about big budget fucking cases here. Like, if someone slips and falls, like, potentially, like, millions could be doled out, and the rule they had in place was reasonable. It's like, were you reasonable? And I feel like that just really speaks to the power of the word. It's like we know as human beings in a courtroom, we know what's reasonable. You know what's reasonable, I know what's reasonable. Did you act reasonable, and are you putting in a reasonable amount of time and a reasonable amount of effort, given the circumstances?
All considered. Yeah. No, I think that's pretty cool. Really, that's a very powerful word, because again, that's what I really want to emphasize 2 things. One is that it's compassionate self-inquiry. This whole thing about reflection and like you're critiquing, not criticizing. And again, I was okay. Well, yeah, why did I hit snooze? Because I go, well, I actually need to sleep. I only had 6 hours sleep. Okay, well, that's reasonable. Like, let's get that. So it's like, well, now let's like identify the core of the problem. Is not it's not the present snooze. It's the poor nighttime routine, etc. So it all starts with compassion, self-inquiry, and then even as you kind of mentioned there, like you're kind of emphasizing the actions, and I just kind of want to emphasize the thoughts, the thing that takes place before we even take the action. It's the thoughts. This is kind of where that's where the seed is. The seed is in the thought, and that's, I feel like, where a lot of us go wrong, or it's just more so we're just so dismissive about the power of our thoughts. And anybody who's read the 4 Agreements and maybe he's listened to some of the other podcasts on that topic just knows like how powerful I believe anyway that thoughts are. Like it really is the seed that will dictate everything else. It's a paradigm. It's the lens through which you see the world. Like these thinking patterns, like there were these, like some people are their biggest critic, and your biggest critic lives inside your own head. It's like, well, you really need to kind of try and address that. Otherwise you're just constantly going to be condemning yourself and, like criticizing yourself. And that just, is going to create these self-sabotaging patterns that are just constantly going to repeat and repeat and repeat until you can get to the place where you're doing it from a place of self-love, that you're doing it out of compassion for yourself rather than from, you're a piece of shit, you should be better, or you're letting everybody down. But it's like, that just doesn't work. So like from a psychological perspective, like that just does not work. And again,
sorry, go on.
Go on.
Oh, I feel like one of the big things, just kind of as you're saying that, and as we go back into like Gabriel Mate stuff and stuff that I was listening to yesterday, I feel like, where did you get that self-talk from? And this is the kind of, the sad part, and we have to analyze it. It's like, I feel like that was given to you by somebody, and probably a parent, because like I can see it in an awful lot of clients, and then I listen to their stories and they tell me about it, and Chris, I know Chris was saying this not too long ago, and I feel it, people tell you a lot more about themselves than they think. I feel like if you're listening, I feel like people nearly tell you everything about themselves without realizing. And I feel like I know an awful lot of people who are hyper critical of themselves, and then they tell me an awful lot about their parents, and their parents sound like the critical type. And it's kind of like, I feel, and again, like, maybe there's not a whole pile of what you can do now about them, but it's like, at least I feel like understanding the problem is a big part of it. And I feel like an awful lot of people is like, where did you learn your thinking habits? It's like, if someone was critical of you the whole time growing up, maybe it's not a parent, maybe it was a friend, maybe it was, a teacher, but somebody important during your formative years, is like, that can really just get that cycle going. And that momentum can be incredibly hard to break if you're not aware of where it came from.
Yeah,
and
if you've ingrained deep thinking patterns, it is kind of quite difficult to break. And the only way that I'm aware of that you can break these thinking patterns is through repetition with emotion. So like these kind of using mantras, using positive self-talk, but doing it constantly, but doing it with emotion. You can't just say, I am happy, I am confident, I am wealthy. Like, it has to be like, I am so happy, I am extremely confident, I am going to be so wealthy. It's like, you really kind of have to put some emotion behind it, because that's really kind of what makes it stick. Otherwise, it's just not powerful enough. It just doesn't stick. You don't resonate with it. Exactly. It's exactly because you don't truly mean it. Exactly. You're kind of saying it just to kind of check the box. You're not saying it because you mean it. That's so this whole thing, like, fake it till you make it. You have to kind of embody what you're saying. And again, it's hard to do these things. I like last year or the year before, 2022. Like, I read this really, really good, like, this little affirmation, little positive prayer. Like, I only said it maybe 20 times that year. Like, I just couldn't get into routine. It was hard. And it was hard to say it every day and get up and say it with compassion. But again, this whole thing failed forward. Maybe this year now, I might say it 60 times, 70 times. And then maybe next year, then I'll do it. And again, if I achieve this goal, or even achieve half of this, what's on this page, is like, that would be absolutely life-changing for me and for a lot of people I know. So it's worth failing forward. It's worth keep trying. Like, just because you failed once, like, very few people get it straight away. Nobody gets it straight away, actually. And some, I'm not sure, I think I've actually heard you or Chris say it, and it's something that these one in a billion. But I think you guys said, I think I picked it up from you, and I've been kind of saying a lot, because I've been covering a lot of sessions recently over the old winter period and all the sickness and stuff. It's just like, you got to pay the beginner tax. People are like, getting frustrated with themselves, like, with skipping or something. It's like, don't worry about it. Listen, the first 10 hours, you're just paying the beginner tax. Get yourself up to speed. Don't worry about it. Just put the time in and get it done as quickly as you possibly can.
I like that.
Yeah, maybe it's Chris. You just got to pay the beginner tax. Just do it. Like, you're like, did you expect to be great starting off? Like, without having any experience? Like, did you expect to be a prodigy, just throwing a pair of gloves and all of a sudden you're knocking people out? Like,
I did though. That's the difference. I did. Like, maybe that's a common thing. Like, because again, I feel like most people do get frustrated, and they are very surprised when they're not amazing at their first goal. I remember I seen a TikTok, and it was like, my toxic, or maybe it was just a meme, but it was like, watching something, like, I'm not sure how into the sourdough bread culture you are, but it's one of them things that, it takes a lot of times, and every time you make it, you're like, I could do it. Now, I don't understand it, but it's like, I remember I heard people talk about it very passionately. Like, every time you do it, you're like, I could change this, and I could change this, and I could do this, and I could do this. And there was somebody who was like, my toxic trait is thinking that I could just do this and get it amazing first time. It's like, that is such a toxic trait. That is such a toxic trait. 100%. It's like, why would you assume that you could do it amazing first time? But I do with most things.
Yeah. So I think that that's kind of the first step is obviously, you know, this kind of whole thing of like accepting that maybe we have something that we could change, being aware of kind of how we communicate that to ourselves, because if it's coming from a place of condemnation, not from a place of love, that, you know, it's probably not going to be that effective. So the things you say, but more importantly, the things that you think actually do matter. Like, it's important what program you're running in there, because that's what you're doing. You're literally programming yourself. And like I said, it can be a bit of a trap that a lot of people get stuck in. And this is kind of why I like to use things like journaling and gratitude journal, just to kind of just make sure that, like, because it said the weeds are going to grow. The weeds grow naturally in my mind. I'm quite, I would say, quite neurotic. People might not necessarily, but maybe it doesn't come across, because I really make a conscious effort to try and be positive, to try and, look for the silver lining in every situation. Look to try and how can I turn this negative into a positive, because that is also very powerful. This concept of like the obstacle is the way, the challenges are where the opportunities lie, etc. But then what else? So then obviously we got this kind of concept of identity. Feel like that's kind of one of the things that people will constantly be pulled back into their identity. And again, just to share my experience over the last couple of years, kind of said, just because I'm kind of starting my own personal transformation, well, more so physical, because I've been developing in many different areas of my life, just not physically, say, for the last couple of years, but I've achieved many other of my goals, like relationship goals and business goals and different things. But this is something that I've let slide. Where was I going with that?
Identity. So your identity.
Yeah. So my identity, apologies. Identity was like, this kind of, I used to be personal trainer. Like, that's who I was. But, say 2014 to 2017, 2018. And then I transitioned from being a personal trainer into being a business owner, because as I kind of grew the team, and then I realized, if I need to kind of cover people's hours, or like more so like, if I can't work, I can't make money, and I was like, oh, fine. So I said, this thing needs to be able to work without me, because if I end up in hospital, and everyone's dependent on me to do all the calls or to take the classes, like shit, we're in big trouble. So that's kind of something that I kind of made a conscious effort to do, kind of working on the business instead of in the business, and trying to develop systems and to build a team, etc. And that's kind of my identity then shifted. And kind of, I trace it back, like that's kind of when it became much harder for me. But it's also because the lifestyle, like, when I was a personal trainer, I was much more active. I was much I was doing 5Ks, 10Ks, kind of just into all that kind of stuff. And then my identity kind of shifted to kind of be more about, business, sales, marketing, coaching the team, still kind of interested in mindset and stuff. But the physicality element definitely took a back seat. So that's kind of an identity that I'm trying to, let's say, step back into now over the next kind of couple of weeks and months, because that's something that I actually love. Like, when I do the class, I'm like, I actually really love coaching people. I really love taking the class. I really love giving out high fives. I really love giving out encouragement. I really like, helping people have breakthroughs. But I felt like at that stage in say my own development, or the development of the business, let's say, it was a necessary step. But I kind of feel like it's time to kind of step back in and kind of adopt that identity again, and kind of really kind of start developing more one-on-one relationships with people, and kind of coach them through fitness, because fitness for me is just a means to an end. Like I'm not somebody, like, I didn't get into this because I was a natural born athlete and I've been fit and healthy my whole life. It's more so because I'm the kind of person that needs structure, needs coaching, needs community, needs all of these things that kind of really kind of keep me on track. Otherwise, it's very easy for me to let it slide, probably because of my impulsive tendencies, let's say. So that's kind of why I done it, not because I was that kid growing up with a six pack. It was the complete opposite. But this kind of concept of identity. So kind of because that's at the core of it. As soon as you become stressed, as soon as things become inconvenient, you will just fall back into your old identity. And that's kind of what happens to a lot of people. People can adopt this new identity. They can adopt this thing for the sake of a challenge, or for the sake of whatever the kind of short-term thing is. And then once that's done, and they lose their why, they lose their mission. Let's say the mission is, right, I will lose 14 pounds in 42 days, the Kickstarter challenge, let's say. And then once they lose that mission, then we fall back into old habits. We fall back to old identity, because that's the identity and the habits, the behaviors, the actions. That's kind of where it all stems from.
I was listening to Alan Watts there the other day, and he was talking about the root word of person. So person comes from the Greek or Latin word, maybe persona, or whatever the root word is, but it comes from persona. And I think the root word of that means mask. And so a person is essentially a mask. It's like we basically hold up the mask to the world. And again, that kind of comes back into our identity. And so, like, what is the mask that you're holding up? And this is kind of where the fake it till you make it thing, I think, comes from. It has to be a mask that obviously fits you. Like, it has to be your mask. You don't want to put up a mask for other people. But I feel like other people play a massive role in your identity. And this is kind of why a supportive tribe is important, because you might have an identity that you're trying to grow out of, but you're in a situation that other people are trying to, or maybe it's not conscious to them, but in that community, you are this person. And like, as I know myself, like, I'm not sure if you've ever, I was talking to a friend about this the other day, I'm not sure if you've ever shown up to a situation and you might have this mask for this group of people and this mask for this group of people, and so you're walking around the party trying to shift masks, and you're like for talk's sake, like, I was at a christening with my friends, and my friends obviously know one version of me, and then Mary was there, and Mary knows probably the absolute sweetest version of me possible, and it just kind of felt not drastically opposing, because I'm not a two-faced kind of person, but they're two different people. Like, I don't show up to Mary's house the same way I show up to Joe's house, and I just thought that was a very funny thing to happen. The same way as if like I met my friends and then I met a group of clients. It's like, well, these people aren't exactly the same person. Like, I feel like we're all very different people at different times, and I feel like sometimes that's part of the problem, because we don't know who we are in our heart of hearts. And like, for me, like, the biggest changes happen for me now that I think about it and we're talking about it, is like, me as a personal trainer, like Coach B, I've created now Coach B, and people assume all these things about me. And I, again, as I said, I could incorporate my shadow and be whoever I want to be. But I feel like when something resonates, when people expect something of me that I always expect myself, I'm like, boom, that's part of it. That's got to be part of the character that I want to be. Let's keep that. And so it's like we start growing this identity of this person that we want to be. And I feel like the thing that's pulling me forward and pulling me in this direction is this thing as a coach. It's like that. Not only am I accountable to this identity, but all these other people see me as this person. Like, this is my identity as part of the tribe and as part of the group. So it's like, it's integral that I be this person, because, otherwise the whole mission isn't going to work if I'm not this person. Like, imagine if I was in Fight and Fit and the person I am now was the person I was when we started. It's like, this thing wouldn't work. Like, it really wouldn't. People would be coming and they'd just leave because they don't want that guy. They want the other guy. And I don't want to be that. I would hate to have to, because I remember I used to feel like a fraud. Like, I don't want to feel like a fraud because I'm not that guy. But, as I said, you got to pay the beginner's tax. If you are a PT and you want to get into this, it's like, I'm sorry. Like, I really can't see any other way in other than you feeling like a fraud for the first 3 years. Maybe unless you're coming at it from, like, maybe you're an unbelievable athlete, like maybe. And I feel like me and you had a little bit of that, like with a wing and a prayer, we stood on our box, and, because that's all we had to offer. It's like, at least we're fit, at least we're fit. Like, we're building the rest of the tools, and probably you were a lot further on than me. It's like, but like, all I had was a baseline of fitness. I can take you through an exercise class, in terms of the personal growth. I haven't been through any of it, but I'll support you and give you a high five. It's like, but whereas now it's like, I've been through the growth myself, like, and not all of it, but a lot of it. And I know, and I can understand, and hopefully, empathize and communicate, and we can kind of work through this together. And then not only that, obviously you study and have to learn about this stuff, and you learn tools from people who have, been through, that's all the benefits of a book. It's like, if you read a book and you pass that information on to somebody, it's like, you've saved everybody an awful lot of time. Like, the person writing the book saved you 10 years, and you saved them 10. Maybe you saved those five hours having to read the book. So it's like, it's kind of, we really have to help people, give them the tools to change, but also it's like, I feel like it is a job that requires tools, and you kind of have to want the identity. So, like, for talk's sake, when we talk about business and all that kind of stuff, like, they talk about niching. It's like, you're probably going to have to niche down with your identity here. It's like, you're going to have to pick an identity. It's like, you can't just be kind of free-flowing spirit of all directions. It's like, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And it doesn't have to be super specific, but you're going to have to pick a direction to grow in. And, if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably healthier, fitter, stronger, maybe, better looking physically, for more confidence or whatever like that. But it's like, that's the direction that we're going. And it's like, what behaviors kind of align with that. And so we got to start, again, faking it till you make it. You got to take the actions. I feel like I did I think 6 Kickstarters. I think I might have missed one Kickstarter we did last year. I'm not sure how many we did. I feel like I've blown. I think I've said 6, and I feel like I've only done 4. Felt like 6.
Yeah, I think like, we were in 3 or 4 Kickstarters last year. Didn't do a huge amount last year.
I feel like I did 4 Kickstarters last year, and I feel like the first one was I kind of felt like I was faking it, but I also did extremely well. But the second one, it felt like the things that I learned the first start were integrated, and then the third one, they were just part of my lifestyle, and then the fourth one, it was nearly kind of a regression because it was so much part of my lifestyle that there wasn't as much planning. I feel like that's, again, we're talking about like you have to constantly row in the right direction to kind of keep this thing going because it's so easy to just drift away.
Yeah, drifting. It's so easy. It's honestly, it's so easy to drift. It's so easy to lose momentum. That is the hard part, especially with health and fitness. Once you this whole thing, miss a day, say the rule of thumb. If you miss a day, that's fine. Shit happens. Life gets in the way. Never miss 2 days in a row, and that's kind of something that I haven't. Let's say.
But sorry. What happens when you miss 2 days in a row, and then 3 days in a row, 4 days, 5? Now you're drifted, and now you're separated from that identity, and that's the bit that I feel like is hard. It's like once you've separated from that identity, I feel like this, like what we're talking about now, this concept of drifting is crucial to understand. Is like that's a normal part of it. You got to swim now, and you're going to notice how like you don't feel like your old self anymore. You haven't got those same kind of like other vibes as that person. Like you're not. It's not just automatic like it was to that person because you drifted away, and you have to work your ass off now to get there, and then you'll get there again, and it'll only be a matter of time you'll drift away. It's like that's the process. That's part of it in my experience.
Yeah, and also what I would say is what you can do is you can create an anchor, like using this metaphor of say like the water drifting. It's like you can use an anchor. You can use an anchor, and the anchor can be so that you don't drift too far. We all will drift. You'll still drift with an anchor, but how far do you drift? Will you drift off in the middle of the ocean, or will you just veer off track? And that's kind of hopefully what we try to do with our program, with our coaching, or even people just personally with their own relationships. If you have these anchors, being people or routines, or I feel like it's mostly people that kind of anchor you. They can just make sure that you don't drift too far. Like we'll all drift because nobody really knows the inner workings of our mind, unless maybe you live with somebody, you don't really know what their kind of day-to-day routine, etc. is. But a lot of people can anchor, and that's kind of what we're trying to be for our clients. Although, like, listen, people kind of come and go, they're super committed, not so committed, blah, blah, blah. But we always anchor that we're here to try and anchor them back and that you're not going to miss it. You're never going to miss 2 weeks in a row. Like, you might have a bad week, but we'll make sure to do our best that because we've anchored you, hopefully that you're not going to miss 2 weeks.
I know some people, and they've literally just cut the fucking course. It's funny.
And that's what we believe. But then, sorry, just to kind of finish on this point, because we're kind of just approaching the hour mark, is this kind of thing you said about identity. And like what is at the core of that kind of that dictates the outcome, and your identity will dictate your priorities. That for me is the key thing. Like if you identify, like say if we're parents now, it's very easy to kind of identify with this. I'm sure for anyone listening that has kids, it's like if you identify as a great mother, like your kids will want for nothing. You will find a way, you'll get the resources, you'll do whatever needs to be done to make sure that the kids get what they need. Same for dads. They'll go out and they'll work themselves to the bone. They'll get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. They'll work till 10 o'clock at night. They'll go burn on 4 hours sleep, whatever, just to make sure that the kids in the family kind of has what they need. So but again, the identity there would be being a great mother. I'm a great dad, or I'm someone that takes care of my family, or whatever these kind of things are. So it's like just really trying to look and say, okay, what actions or outcomes or behaviors is your identity? Because again, it's not necessarily always bad. Like we usually do all these things with good intentions, but it's more so it's just like understanding the bigger picture to say that to be a self-sacrificing mother, who has been putting our kids first for 10, 15, 20 years to the detriment of our own health. Because I feel like we're so detached from death. It's like, I feel like we don't really feel it's like that could cost you 10 years with your children. The fact that you're not prioritizing your health right now, you're eating shit, and you're 3-4 stone overweight. It's like that's going to cost you eventually. Eventually, you're going to have to pay that price. In the short term, yes, you're doing the right thing, but long term, the consequences will bite you in the bum. Let's say, but the identity will dictate your priorities, and then how do you shift your identity? You basically look for people that inspire you. Pick who's your top 5 people that inspire you. What are the character traits? What are the goals that they have, the things that they've accomplished? What kind of makes you jealous about other people? What kind of things do you wish you are? And slowly but surely start to try and create this character, and then try and act in alignment with this new character. And then over time, your identity will shift, but it will only shift through action, through results, like actually doing the thing, actually walking the walk, so that you can convince yourself that actually, no, I am this new person. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not the fat guy anymore because, I've been lean for 18 months. I'm a new person now. It's like these are the only ways to shift the identity from what I can read. What do you think about that?
I feel like there's something, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there's something a couple of layers deeper that is kind of like, what about the fat guy who is, lean, or what about the lean guy who used to be fat, who still feels fat? It's like how like at your core, like is it just about actions? Is it just about time in the new experience? Like, how do you really shift, like you're like who you really feel like?
So I think these, let's say, these kind of esoteric questions that are, like these, like, what is the meaning for life? I kind of feel like it's always going to be personal to the person, or it depends. But again, I'm saying, I don't know. Like, this is, guys, anyone listening here, like, this is our amateur attempt at psychology, let's say, and trying to share our personal experience to try and kind of hopefully at least point you in the right direction. But I feel like the only way to do it is to do the deep work for yourself. It's like, start listen to your inner voice a little bit more and understand why do I still feel like that guy? What is it?
Sorry. So maybe I do have somewhat of an answer to the question that I asked. Now that I think about it, is like, maybe if we go back to Gabe or Matthew, maybe it is something to do with trauma. Maybe it's something. Maybe you were because again, normally the identities that you find hard to stick, you want to shake them. It's maybe a negative experience, and maybe it's something to do with a past trauma that you experienced. Again, maybe you're bullied when you're fat. Maybe somebody pointed out to you. Maybe you're embarrassed because of it. Or whatever. And maybe it's not just you're overweight. It's like maybe you don't feel smart. Whatever it is.
Yeah, but usually I feel what we do is, because unless like there's a genuine effort of like self introspection, we usually mislabel it. So it's like that whole thing is like, oh, I still feel like the fat guy. It's like, okay, no, like, is it do you feel like the fat guy, or is it like, what is it, something, was it self-confidence and you're just calling it, you're just saying it's because you're fat? Is it, because you maybe felt let's say excluded, or whatever? It's like,
exactly, because you could now be lean and still feel not confident, and you reference that to, oh, I still feel the fat guy. It's like, no, you still don't feel confident. Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of time we mislabel or maybe misinterpret. This is kind of why it's important to like look at our, like, say, our limiting beliefs. Maybe it's not. Usually it's not what we think it is. Because sometimes we can, especially with ourselves, especially unless we're kind of good at self introspection, or that we maybe get let's say an outsider's opinion, somebody that doesn't have all the the emotional baggage, or that can actually see our situation maybe for kind of what it is, or maybe just I'd say like a professional therapist, a professional psychologist, etc. They can maybe add some kind of context to the situation, because it's very hard. It's a very, 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 very difficult thing to do, to be truly what's unbiased when we're trying to, let's say, critique ourselves, because we're massively biased. So it's kind of trying to understand that. So it's like accepting that, I'm probably wrong, or maybe I'm either being too hard or I'm being too easy on myself. Usually, you've either been one of the two. You're either being too hard or being too easy. So just recognize that, and this is kind of why, again, I feel like coaching is such a powerful tool, because things that maybe aren't very obvious to you are extremely obvious to everybody else around you. Because, oh no, of course, it's this. It's like you do that all the time. Like, oh really? Do I? What? Oh sugar. And then now kind of opens up a new layer.
I noticed something today. This is the last point that I have to make. I stuck the Wi-Fi code on my press door, and so I'd see it when I opened the door. And I have not seen that thing once since I moved into that house over 2 years ago. I've missed that every time I've opened the door. I've literally never seen it, not once. And just, I feel like that's kind of, speaks to, how unconscious things we can be. It's like things could be right in front of your face. And if somebody had asked me, and the Wi-Fi box was in the most awkward place in the world, and I looked at this thing every day, I literally wouldn't have been able to tell them where the easiest place to find it. And sometimes I do that all the time. Like, my school bag is filled with everything I need. And if I need anything, I never go to my school bag, because I don't believe that anything is there, because there's just so much clutter in my bag of all the random things that I need, or that drawer that you have at home of all. Oh, I need this. Oh, I'll keep this, and then it's like, well, you can't.
You'll never touch it again. Me and Jim were talking about this last night, kind of trying to move towards maybe more, because the house has become a little bit mad. Obviously, Christmas then Molly's birthday was kind of soon after. I just kind of tried like this kind of minimalism. We're kind of even cleaning out our own kind of clothes drawers and stuff like that. I'm just saying, like, Jen, like 5 things, like why do we need more than 5 t-shirts, 5 pairs of jeans, 5 things? Because then obviously she was a girl and she was saying like, oh well, you need a top for jeans, and then you need your shorts for a dress, and all these different possible kind of scenarios. And I was like, okay, and fair enough. I was like, but you'll probably just buy new ones anyway. Like when the time comes, it's like you always have to go shopping to get something new for this event. So it's like, really, we're probably not going to use this kind of stuff. So kind of just, I feel like just trying to clear the space. I kind of find this, I was talking to Chris about this yesterday as well, was how like our environment, our external environment is a reflection of our internal environment. It's kind of our external environment is unorganized and messy. Usually our inner environment is a little bit disorganized and messy as well.
Just on that, my environment has nearly been outsourced to Chloe. Like, she is literally one of the most organized people, especially in a house. And I found like that massively affects me. Now, my skill for organizing is still like far from. They're definitely a lot better than it was. I've been somewhat civilized. But I feel like just being in an organized environment, even though I'm not the one doing it, helps keep my mind structured. And I feel like if you can outsource any kind of organization capacity to declutter your environment, it's like in my experience, it is just as effective as doing it yourself. Now, long term, it's not a great solution because you're probably eventually going to have to be the organizer. But just being in an organized environment is massively beneficial. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to the whole Jordan Peterson thing, like clean your room, like, you know, like don't try and change, don't put your own house in order before you kind of go out there and kind of try and change the world. And that's kind of what this podcast is, just me and the guys just trying to put our own lives in order, kind of work on this path to self-actualization, trying to be the best versions of ourselves. I'm definitely a work in progress, and I'm going to continue to fail forward. But like, you only have to be one step ahead. You only have to one step ahead to kind of help other people along on the journey, and that's kind of really what we're trying to do. So, anybody who's listening to the podcast, thank you very much for your time. Really, really appreciate you dedicating an hour to kind of listen to us. If you made it all the way to the end, I hope you found something valuable, or something that kind of maybe spurred a new thought in your mind, or you got a little golden nugget somewhere. Please do like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. Share it with a friend if you think it's going to be useful. But more importantly, reach out, ask us questions. Like, you know, if you kind of said something today that kind of really resonated with you, let us know about it. If you're enjoying the podcast, let us know about it.
If you're not
appreciate it.
If you're not sure where to ask those questions, you can comment on the YouTube channel. Would be a good place to comment and again engage with us on the YouTube channel, because if you're listening on Spotify, there's no comment section. You can comment on YouTube, and if you have any questions, we'll bring up in the next.
Comment on YouTube, but again, feel free to reach out to me directly. You'll get me at Stephen Mull on Instagram, Brandon's FF Movement Coach. Find our Facebook page, email us, text us. Said, like, we're in this job to help people. So if we can help you, it would be a genuine pleasure. And if you're always look for good feedback, or any feedback in general, but like, if it's good feedback, again, it really does make us great. Like, I love getting the wee thank you cards and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's great. Like,
negative feedback too. If you're biting your lip and you're going, "Here, lads, can't say that," feel free.
Yeah, but it's more so like, man, we're human too. We have emotions, so try and use a wee criticism sandwich there if you do have something bad to say. All right, guys, listen, we're gonna have to wrap it up there. Thank you very much for your time. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we will see you all next week.
Peace.